Hey there, G3XE. Here with a second installment of Malam's Maze and the quest surrounding the town of Fellhaven and its trouble with a newly moved-in young red dragon. So, when in and around Fellhaven, they may inquire about the castle that has now since been abandoned for about 100 years. And its original owner, the history behind it, and the rumors that have, urban legends that have spread. The castle at one time belonged to a powerful wizard named Malam, M-A-L-A-M. So it's a palindrome, which is a word that's spelled the same backwards as it is forwards. And that's going to come in way, way later because there's going to be a puzzle in that castle's dungeon that has to do with palindromes. But here is the history of Malam's maze, as it then became to be called. So Malam was a very wealthy and powerful wizard, and he had 13 daughters. He, unlike other wizards who were sometimes loners, he was actually really well liked in the city at that time, or in the town to the south, and was seen as kind of like a benefactor. No, he wasn't like any like written down leader, but many people looked to him for guidance, and he was a patron for many artists and bards. He loved merriment and merrymaking, and hosted festivals and parties in his hearth hall. You know, he was very well liked, and made a lot of money for the town through various wizarding, exploits and things, and would guide a lot of the town's decisions. Now, this is back 100 years ago, so, no one really who knew Malam is still living. Maybe one or two. The one mage who lives in Fellhaven, but I digress. So Malam is this powerful wizard, but he also is interested in scrying and seeing the future, in fate magic, which is a slightly dangerous, type of magic to meddle in. And he has this vision one night that when he ceases construction on his castle, which he had commissioned and was almost completely built, but was still stables were being added, and he needed a fishing dock and whatever. It was a fairly big piece of real estate, right? He had a vision that if he stopped building onto it once it was done, that all of his daughters would die and that a curse would come upon his family. So petrified by this, and very convinced that it was true, he began keeping construction going. When for all intents and purposes, the castle was finished being built, he kept ordering more and more projects. At a certain point, he decided to stop, thinking that maybe he was wrong, and then his wife takes ill as soon as he stops work on the castle. And he, seeing this, immediately begins work, but it was too late, and his wife passes. This was kind of the turning point for Malam to where he started losing his mind. So he grows increasingly obsessed with his work and understanding fate magic. His daughters see him less and less. He becomes cooped up in his library, and spending more and more of his wealth on his own castle and building it out instead of the town to the south and helping it. So he stops being a benefactor, stops having parties, stops guiding the town and helping it in times of hardship, and spending more of his money on commissioning senseless construction projects, right? So if he would have a wing built and then build a completely different wing on top of it. He would have staircases built that went to nowhere. He would have rooms that, had no door. It was just a room with no entry to it. secret passageways built, you name it, just anything to keep the castle being under construction. Around this time, his servants began to see and hear strange things and report these strange occurrences. Malam was known to go days without eating and would wander around in his robes, or in his nightgown, nothing else, muttering. His daughters finally had enough and moved out, the legend goes, and they spread to different corners of the realm. And alone, this only drove Malam crazier, ordered more and more projects. Now, with his decreasing defenses and more servants leaving his side, or people who work for him leaving him, thinking that he's going crazy, Mad Malam they called him, bandits and monsters and nearby ne'er-do-wells started thinking, hey, this castle, this lord is no longer competent. He has weakening defenses, yet still a bit of gold. So they begin raiding, right? So now he's got monsters and bandits raiding his, doing regular attacks on his castle. And so with the remaining servants, his projects that he's having them built turn more violent, I guess you would say, because he starts building traps and, dungeon places for torturing and just kind of awful stuff, death traps and bigger and stronger walls, weapons. Eventually, he becomes this jittery, paranoid shadow of his former self, and the last of his servants leaves when his money is completely spent. And that was the last people heard of Mad Malam. No one ever saw him leave, although he was assumed to have died alone in his, massive castle, somewhere amidst the crazy winding and twisting hallways and nonsensical stairways, and he being the last living soul who knew the right exact way to get through all the traps without triggering stuff. And so that's how the castle stayed, abandoned and left to gather dust until recently, when the dragons moved in. And now can be seen, usually in the mornings, perched upon the high tower, just gazing across the realm. So that is Malam's castle, which then became known as Malam's Maze, as he and maybe a few select servants during its construction were the only ones who knew exactly how to get through to certain areas. To the average person, it's a maze. As local legends go, it is, of course, supposedly quite haunted. However, doesn't stop adventurers going in there to every once in a while to see what gold and other treasures they can loot from the place, because though he spent, most of his hoard, the castle is chock full of artifacts and paintings and goblets and, all sorts of stuff of value, as he was a very rich man at one time. And so everyone in Fellhaven knows of Malam's Maze or Malam's Castle, though few people speak of it in public. But, if they inquire about it, if the party does, this tale can be relayed to them, preferably at a creepy moment, right, where this story can have full effect. And I would go... There are certain details that will come into play later, so I would emphasize those so that you can get a good payoff later on in the campaign. So the next video is going to be about traveling and camping and the different areas surrounding Fellhaven and the castle. So hope you continue watching. Thanks.